My name is Riley Maddox. I'm 34 years old. 2 weeks ago, I got escorted out of the company I built from scratch by a security guard who didn't say a word. Just stood there in khakis and a fleece vest staring ahead like I might suddenly chuck a laptop at the CEO's head. I didn't. I handed over my badge, my MacBook, my key fob. My palms didn't sweat. My mouth didn't move. But inside, something ancient and surgical clicked into place. They fired me with no cause. Just a vague line about strategic misalignment and a pre-filled severance packet with an NDA so toothless it practically apologized for existing. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just flipped through the pages like I was checking a restaurant menu. HR used phrases like, "respect the legacy," and Trina, our so-called VP of brand, gave me that fake compassion face you'd wear while euthanizing a beloved goldfish. I think she even squeezed my arm. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't, because this wasn't the ending, not even close. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Always curious who else is awake in the dark. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. See, on the outside, I was the co-founder turned chief strategy officer of SignalNest Analytics, a rapidly scaled AI platform that could predict brand sentiment shifts faster than a PR team could type up a canned apology. But on the inside, I was a ghost, marginalized, slowly erased under layers of pastel rebrands, tone alignment metrics, and a cartoon mascot named Trusty Yes, really. But here's what they didn't know. Buried on page 42 of my original sale agreement section 9.4b, right after some dry language about arbitration and patent retention, was a clause. 1 paragraph, 6 sentences, small enough to miss if you weren't reading like your life depended on it. It gave me the right to buy the company back for $1 if I was ever terminated without cause. Not equity, not severance, control. The entire engine. The clause was airtight and enforceable. They forgot. I didn't. Theo, my lawyer, had raised an eyebrow at the time. "You think they'll miss it?" he'd asked. "They won't even see it," I said. Now the clock had started ticking. When I got home that night, I didn't rage. I didn't pour bourbon or blast music. I made peppermint tea, the kind that tastes like hope and unresolved grief. I pulled open the drawer beside my bed and stared at the envelope inside. White, clean, labeled in black Sharpie, in case they're stupid enough. I slid it out, ran my finger over the flap. Not yet, I thought, but soon. The silence that followed that firing was heavier than the firing itself. No one texted. No one checked in. The Slack channels I used to live in were dark. My calendar cleared. It felt like dying with my eyes open. But I wasn't dead. I was watching, waiting, and they just handed me the pen. 9 years earlier, I was living in a crumbling duplex on South Congress Avenue in Austin. The kind of place where the walls sweat in August, the pipes screamed when you flushed, and the ceiling fan clicked like it was counting down to its own death. I had a mattress on the floor, a whiteboard bolted to the kitchen wall, and a microwave that had a vendetta against anything more complicated than popcorn. That night, the microwave shorted while I was reheating leftover enchiladas. The lights flickered, I swore, and the breaker tripped. Total blackout. I didn't move. I just sat there in the glow of my laptop screen, still debugging a model that had refused to learn sarcasm correctly. My head throbbed. My stomach grumbled. My bank account was hovering somewhere between overdraft and embarrassment, but the code was close, dangerously close to doing something real. I'd been building a real-time sentiment engine that could scrape thousands of data inputs, tweets, reviews, chat logs, customer service transcriptions, and detect not just positive or negative tone, but subtext. Fear dressed as anger, defensiveness masked as humor. That night, after I flipped the breaker and shoved a cold enchilada into my mouth like it owed me money, I tweaked a weight in the model's attention layer and hit run. And it worked. Just like that, the engine caught something new. A shift in emotional inflection buried inside a stream of airline complaint tweets. It identified a tone pattern that correlated with viral backlash nearly 36 hours before it started trending. That model, written on an 8-year-old MacBook that wheezed like a dying animal, would go on to save a major airline's PR department from a potential billion-dollar nosedive. Back then, it wasn't a company. It was me, a folding chair, a cracked whiteboard, and caffeine purchased with couch cushion quarters. I named the prototype Nest because I wanted it to feel like something warm and organic wrapped around raw, predictive code. A home for messy signals. A place to interpret chaos. I was alone, but it didn't feel lonely. I was broke, but I felt rich in this weird chest-thumping way that only comes when you're building something no one else believes in yet. I'd scribble on the whiteboard at 3 a.m., spill coffee on my keyboard, and forget to eat. It wasn't healthy, but it was holy. That apartment turned into an illegal co-working space within a year. 6 of us crammed into 700 square feet, taking turns with the shower and running models overnight to keep the electric bill under control. We stacked ramen cups like trophies and mapped UX flows across the fridge. We got noticed after someone posted a viral thread about Nest predicting a wave of apology ads before they aired. Within 48 hours, we had 2 VC calls and a licensing offer. We thought we'd made it. We hadn't, not yet. But we were damn close. And that old microwave, still plugged in despite its attitude problem, sat quietly in the corner, like it knew it had kicked off the whole thing. The offer came on a Thursday, humid and heavy, like the sky was sweating. A mid-sized data firm out of Chicago, Polaris Ventures, said all the right things. "We love your mission. We believe in your vision. We want to help you scale responsibly." I should have known from the way they overused the word stewardship in the deck that they'd be trouble. They weren't the biggest bidder, but they were the most convincing. They talked mentorship, not just money. They promised I'd stay on with full strategic oversight equity, rolling forward, and the freedom to keep my team intact. I remember standing on the sidewalk outside a taqueria, still chewing on carne asada, when their offer came through. I didn't say yes right away. I said I wanted to structure something weird. Because I'd been up late, reading founder horror stories, burnouts, buyouts, gaslighting shadow promotions into irrelevance. I didn't want to be another casualty in a Medium post titled, "What I Wish I Knew Before Selling My Startup." So I asked Theo, my lawyer, if we could include a failsafe. Failsafe, how he said, half intrigued, half concerned. If they ever try to cut me loose without cause, I said I want the right to buy everything back. The company, the code, the brand. For exactly $1. Theo blinked. "That's not enforceable." "But it is legal," I said, "just buried." He spent the weekend drafting it. Section 9.4b. Nestled right between a tangle of IP disclaimers and something about governing jurisdiction. It was clean, clear, and oddly poetic. In the event that Ms. Maddox is terminated without cause, she shall retain the irrevocable right to repurchase the original SignalNest IP and operations entity for the original consideration of $1 within 30 business days. I remember Theo holding up the page like it might burn. "You think they'll actually sign this?" "They won't even read it," I said. "They'll be too busy high-fiving over projected ARR." And they were. Derek Sloan, the CFO, barely looked up from his espresso when I slid the docs across the table. Trina Meadows, their head of brand strategy, was too busy checking her phone to ask questions. One of the board members chuckled. $1, huh? That's bold." "Symbolic," I said, smiling. "Legacy's priceless. But paperwork needs a number." They signed, I sold. SignalNest became a division of Polaris Ventures. And I stayed on officially as Chief Strategy Officer, unofficially as the last person in the building who actually gave a damn. At first, it worked. The engineers still called me founder like it meant something. My Slack pings mattered. Clients asked for me by name. Trina posted about culture convergence, and Derek ran forecasting models like he was solving world hunger. But something started shifting. Meetings got fluffier. Product syncs started getting replaced with brand alignment sessions. Engineers got cut out of roadmap discussions. The whiteboard that still had the first version of our decision tree diagram on it, Trina had it removed during something called an office vibe audit. "It gives off founder trauma," she said. I laughed. Then I realized she wasn't joking. I kept a copy of that clause in my laptop sleeve. Not because I needed it, not yet, but because it made me feel like I still had an edge, like I hadn't totally been swallowed. They didn't see it. None of them did. But they would. They started with the walls. pale blue, off-white muted sand colors pulled from an Instagram therapist's mood board. The R&D floor looked like a meditation spa without the incense. All the whiteboards disappeared, replaced by calm corners and abstract art installations titled things like Symbiotic Synergy and Momentum in Bloom. The engineers hated it. I hated it. Trina was thrilled. "We're elevating the space," she said, twirling a pencil between her fingers like a baton. "The energy needs to support trust." The next to go were the product jam sessions. We used to have these messy, brilliant, no-agenda brainstorms in the bullpen, fueled by red vines and crumpled Post-its. Real innovation happened there. Real arguments, too. We yelled, we swore, but we built. Trina rebranded them into brand alignment touchpoints. Same time slot, different purpose, no engineers invited. Instead, it was marketing managers talking about evoking feelings of safety through color gradients and how our emotional UX signals should evoke the same warmth as a hug from an old friend. I remember one guy named Lucas, whose job I never quite understood, suggesting we add a scent component to the dashboard. A scent. For a data analytics platform. "Vanilla," he said confidently. "Vanilla means trust." I looked across the room and locked eyes with Nina, who mouthed, "What the actual fuck, like it was a prayer." Meanwhile, features that we'd spent months testing were quietly removed. A transparency toggle that let enterprise clients view raw NLP scores, gone. Too anxiety-inducing. A language comparison tool that let hospitals compare sentiment across departments. Gutted overwhelms the average user. They said they wanted to simplify. What they meant was dumb it down, wrap it in soft curves and cartoon mascots, and call it visionary. Trina unveiled Trusty, our new Insight Ambassador. A round beach ball-shaped AI icon with eyes and a perpetual wink. The original design had him holding a tiny magnifying glass. By week 2, he wore sunglasses. "Our clients are stressed," she explained, clicking through a slide deck filled with emojis. "They want data with good vibes. Think Duolingo meets Oprah." I stared at her. I genuinely wasn't sure if she believed it or was just high on her own buzzwords. Derek nodded sagely beside her. "This is the future of AI. Soften the edge." No one asked what the data scientists thought. No one cared that our accuracy rate had quietly dipped during all these changes. I started skipping the meetings. I'd sit alone on the 5th-floor balcony, nursing burnt coffee, and a headache I couldn't shake. My badge still worked, my title still held. But my input. It had been tuned out like a distant radio station nobody wanted to find again. Julian, our lead UX from the early days, cornered me after one of those pastel meetings. "They're killing it," he said. "No preamble, no warm-up." "I know. They think Trusty is a feature. Trusty's a fucking funeral." I didn't argue. He was right. I thought about pulling the clause then. But I waited. Because this wasn't sabotage. Not yet. It was rot. Slow, subtle, dressed in inspirational posters and brand handbooks printed on recycled paper. The kind that spreads before anyone notices the floor's about to give way. There's a unique kind of heartbreak in watching something you built get rebranded into oblivion, while you sit 2 feet away from the wreckage, smiling for the sake of appearances. That was me. Every morning, I'd walk into SignalNest, or EchoNest, as they'd started calling it, in casual meetings, step past the new motivational wall decals, and pretend everything was fine. But I could feel it. The tension, like fiberglass under the skin. Our floor used to hum literal noise keyboards, late-night music, the occasional Nerf dart flying past your head. Now it was quiet. Sterile. Engineers started coming in late, leaving early, skipping lunches. You'd walk by someone's desk and see the cursor blinking on an empty screen. Some started wearing headphones just to avoid conversations entirely. I watched Miles, my former intern turned back-end lead, burn out in slow motion. He once rewrote an entire alert system over a weekend because a client's CEO emailed us in all caps. Now he nodded through meetings with the same blank stare as someone watching infomercials at 3 a.m. I tried to raise flags, soft ones at first. "We're seeing churn in the data team I mentioned in a leadership sync." Derek nodded like I told him it might rain. "That's natural in scaling phases." "They're not being replaced," I added. "We're bleeding without transfusion." Trina didn't even look up from her iPad. "We're leaning into narrative trust. The numbers will follow the story." Narrative trust. I went home that night and poured 2 fingers of mezcal, sat on my couch, with the lights off, and replayed those 2 words in my head. They sounded like something a cult leader would say before passing out poisoned punch. I kept showing up, though. That's the sick part. I kept logging in, attending meetings, adding comments to docs I knew would be ignored. I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to be inside long enough to see just how bad they were willing to get. Needed to be there when the tipping point came. And I felt it coming, like weather. Then came the Slack exclusions. Channels I'd created, non your product DOS jams. Client UR feedback went private. Calendar invites stopped including me. New hires didn't know my name. One asked if I worked in finance. I laughed. He didn't understand why. Even Nina, who used to send me TikToks of her cat falling into laundry baskets, went quiet. Until one night, around 8:45 p.m., she called. "Can I speak freely?" she asked. I stepped outside barefoot onto the cold back porch tiles. Always. They slashed the NLP research budget by 70% today. No notice. Just a redirect memo and an emoji-filled FAQ doc. I didn't say anything. "They're hiring a vibe coach, Riley." I closed my eyes. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding it for days. "You told me once to trust my gut. My gut says this place is dying." I sat on the porch swing, the wood creaking underneath me, and said, "Then it's probably already dead." But I still didn't open the drawer. Still didn't send the envelope. Because it wasn't enough to know the ship was sinking. I wanted to be there when they realized I'd built the lifeboat. The hallway smelled like burnt coffee and fresh paint remnants of yet another brand refresh. This one involved swapping out the company font and installing moss art on the 4th floor. That morning, I'd just finished deleting a passive-aggressive email draft I would never send when Sam knocked on my glass office door. He didn't step in, just lingered in the frame, like he wasn't sure if walking inside would set something off. "They've got a list," he said. My heart paused just for a second, then kept going like it hadn't. "What kind of list?" "Layoffs," he said. "It's prepped, you're on it." Sam had been my intern back when I still slept under my desk twice a week. He once spilled Thai tea on our original server rack and nearly cried. Now he was leading the mobile team and looking at me like he was delivering a eulogy. "They want you out before the next investor call," he continued. "They're framing it as post-founder independence." I didn't flinch, I just nodded. "Who told you?" I asked. He shook his head. "Doesn't matter, it's real." I waited until he left, until the door clicked softly shut before I moved. My body felt cold and mechanical, like muscle memory had taken over. I stood, walked to the corner drawer of the metal filing cabinet I never used, and pulled it open. There it was. A simple white envelope labeled in my own handwriting. Inside, one personal check, filled out in blue ink, signed and dated. Pay to the order of SignalNest Analytics, LLC. Amount $1. Memo, Section 9.4b, Buyback Clause Enforcement. I held it for a moment, just feeling the weight of it. Paper doesn't weigh much, but this felt heavier than steel. I didn't mail it yet, but I took it home, tucked it into my laptop sleeve just beneath the edge of my charger. I wanted it close, like a secret too important to leave behind. That night I called Theo. No pleasantries, no preamble. "It's time." He didn't ask what I meant. He just said, "I'll start the prep." I didn't sleep. I didn't drink. I just sat on my couch with the lights off, and Trusty's idiotic wink burned into my brain. Somewhere upstairs, my neighbor's TV played a rerun of a show where people built homes they couldn't afford. I thought of Julian escorted out with no warning, of Nina budgeting her wedding around Trina's quarterly mood swings, of the code we wrote at 3 a.m., fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower. They weren't just gutting a company. They were erasing a family. I went to my bedroom, pulled out the same pen I'd used 9 years ago to sign the sale contract, and wrote one more thing, a cover note. 4 lines. Simple, blunt. I am formally exercising my rights under Section 9.4b. The enclosed check fulfills all contractual conditions. Ownership reverts upon confirmation of receipt. RM. I slid it in, sealed it, placed it on the nightstand next to a photo of the original team packed into my old duplex kitchen, smiling like idiots. We looked tired. We looked happy. We looked like we still believed. And maybe I did too. Not in them, not anymore. But in the clause. In what came next. Monday morning arrived with the smell of desperation masked in lemon-scented floor cleaner. I walked into the HR suite at 4:30 p.m., sharp exactly as scheduled on the calendar invite labeled simply Update. No agenda, no subject line. The kind of meeting title that tried to gaslight you into thinking you were paranoid. Rebecca from HR sat at the table, posture, stiff lips pursed. Derek and Trina flanked her like proud parents, about to deliver terrible news with a smile. Derek had that smug lean in his chair he always used when he was bluffing in poker. Trina had a printed version of the transition packet, already waiting complete with hashtags for my hypothetical LinkedIn announcement. "We appreciate everything you've built here." Derek began, his voice oozing politeness, like molasses sliding off expired fruit. Trina added, "This doesn't erase your legacy, Riley. It's just time for a new chapter." She smiled like she expected me to thank her. I didn't speak. I just flipped through the paperwork slowly, deliberately. Severance insulting, NDA unenforceable, exit statement nauseating. I signed nothing. Rebecca cleared her throat. "We'll need your badge and devices before you leave the floor." Of course. Security met me outside. He didn't say anything, just escorted me to the elevator, like I might suddenly start defacing company walls with a Sharpie manifesto. As the doors closed, I saw Trina laughing at something Derek whispered, already turned back toward her phone. They thought it was over, but they were only just starting to pay. That night, I wore the same hoodie I used to wear during our first all-nighters. Went home, brewed tea, sat at my desk with the envelope in front of me, Theo on speakerphone. "You sure you want to go without a cover letter?" he asked. "I don't need a speech. Just send it." He slid the check, the cover note, and a copy of the original clause into a FedEx envelope. Labeled, stamped, sent. By the time they finished their overpriced cortados, the next morning, the package was en route. I didn't check the tracking number, didn't refresh obsessively. I'd done my part. I'd fired the first legal bullet. Now it was just gravity. 3 days later, Theo texted me delivered, signed for at 9:17 a.m. by mailroom. At 11:42 a.m., they forwarded it to legal. By 3:10 p.m., Polaris's general counsel, Marion Barnes, called an emergency internal meeting. At 4:25 p.m., I received a screenshot from a sympathetic assistant I barely remembered hiring a Slack message from Marianne to Derek and Trina. "Did either of you read Clause 9.4b in the original acquisition contract?" They hadn't. And that's when everything began to unravel. Because while they were busy rebranding my company into a cartoon mascot with sunglasses, they'd ignored the one thing that mattered: the paperwork. By Thursday, Theo started fielding calls. Quiet ones. Legal firms sniffing around, trying to gauge if we were bluffing. We weren't. The check had been cashed. The clause had teeth. I sat at a diner booth that night, with a greasy burger and a phone full of unread messages, watching the sun go down behind the skyline. I thought about all the sleepless nights, the mistakes, the compromises. And I thought about that clause, 6 sentences I'd fought to keep buried in the deal, and how those 6 sentences were about to burn the whole place down. It started with a rumor. Mediloop Health, one of our earliest clients, the one whose compliance officer used to call me directly at 11 p.m. during deployment week, froze all renewals. Quietly, no announcement. Just a pending internal review note sent to our customer success manager. I didn't even have to reach out, they called me. "Riley," the voice crackled through my cell. "While I sat in the parking lot of an old bookstore, we heard you might be going independent again." I smiled into the receiver. "Let's just say I'm preparing to operate at full capacity." She didn't hesitate. "If you're in, we're out." By the next morning, 3 more clients followed. One forwarded me an internal memo titled "Re-evaluation of AI Partnerships Due to Leadership Instability." That's what they called it. Instability. The cracks were showing. I didn't need to do anything. The clause had already detonated. My hands were clean. My inbox, however, was on fire. Theo timed it perfectly. 72 hours after the package had been confirmed received, he sent out a brief email. No press, just whispers to a short list of trusted contacts. "Heads up. Nest Core Insights will be operational within 30 days. Same tools, new leadership. If you're interested, we'll be talking soon." The message spread like kindling. The first one to post publicly was Joya, the head of data at Streamsight Media, and one of our fiercest defenders back in the early product days. She tweeted, "We signed up for Riley, Not Trusty the cartoon. Data is serious. We're done pretending otherwise. We're moving. 60,000 likes. 10 trade publications picked it up. Derek's face must have gone white when he saw the headline, Founder Reclaims Company with $1 Clause. Polaris in freefall. Meanwhile, inside the building, it was chaos. Slack threads were being deleted. Legal emails marked urgent. People started printing resumes at the copy machine like it was the apocalypse. I got 4 unsolicited DMs that day. One from a junior data analyst I'd never met who just wrote, "Tell me where to send my portfolio." Trina posted on LinkedIn about the trials of visionary leadership. It included a stock photo of a mountain climber and a Brené Brown quote about vulnerability. The comments were limited within the hour. The board called an emergency session. They didn't invite Derek or Trina. Too late. Marion, the general counsel, had already explained everything. You didn't complete the legal merger, she told them flatly. SignalNest is still alive as a Delaware entity. Riley still owns the controlling share. You mean she wants to cause a scene, someone had asked. Marion didn't blink. No, she is the scene. I imagined Derek sitting in his office, tie half undone, refreshing his email, watching contracts unravel. Imagined Trina, pacing voice climbing into a crescendo as she tried to spin narrative trust into an actual PR strategy. But it was done. They thought I'd be angry, vindictive. Maybe. But mostly I was calm. I walked the Ladybird Trail that evening, in jeans and a hoodie, listened to the city breathe, checked my inbox once 23 new messages. The storm wasn't coming. It was here, and they had no umbrella. The new office wasn't flashy. 5th floor corner suite in an old brick building downtown, with creaky elevators and exposed beams that smelled faintly of sawdust and ambition. We didn't need a floor plan, we needed speed. Agility. Room for maybe 20 desks, 2 war rooms and a coffee machine that cost more than my first car. I signed the lease with Theo, watching like a proud father. He slid the keys across the table and said, "You're sure you want to call it Nest Core?" I nodded. "Let them keep the cartoon beach ball. I'll keep the core." Miles was the first to walk through the door. He didn't say anything at first, just dropped his backpack, looked around and let out this long exhale like he'd been holding his breath for months. Then he turned to me, held out his hand. "Let's build something that bites this time." I smiled. We already did. By the end of the week, 7 more had joined. Nina brought 3 of her former team on a group call that felt more like a reunion than an interview. Julian sent his resume with the subject line, "Ready to unfuck things." Even Beth from accounting, who once handed me a spreadsheet titled Founder Fantasies versus Budget Realities, sent over a revised P&L and wrote I was never Team Derek. Let's go. We didn't bother with interviews. We held a war council, 10 of us, folding chairs, pizza boxes, a whiteboard that Theo mounted himself already scribbled with Operation Engine Reboot in red Sharpie. I stood there, marker in hand, and stared at it for a minute longer than I should have. Then I said, "You know the code. You know the pain points. We're not starting from scratch." Beth added, "We've got 3 months of burn and a bridge round waiting on launch." Nina leaned forward. "What do we call this phase?" I paused. Resurrection. And we meant it. Every decision we made had fangs. No fluff, no mascots, no pastel rebrands. Just clean data, clear insight, and zero tolerance for bullshit. We pulled the old framework from archived Git branches, stripped out the bloat, rewired the backend to prioritize raw interpretability. Transparency became our brand. Accuracy became our religion. Meanwhile, Polaris flailed. Clients walked. Analysts wrote think pieces with titles like The Claws Heard Round the Boardroom. Derek released a memo blaming cultural friction and unsanctioned legal structures. It read like someone Googled how to dodge accountability and picked the top 5 excuses. Trina went quieter. Her last post was a selfie in a co-working lounge with a caption that said, "New chapter, same fire." The comments were disabled by noon. We didn't reply. Didn't post think pieces, just kept shipping. It felt good, no righteous to build again. To walk into a space where the air didn't reek of passive aggression and performative meetings, where you didn't have to pretend to be calm while your soul was being sanded down by committees. Sam brought donuts. Julian brought chaos. Theo framed the original clause and hung it above the coffee machine. It was like church, but with war drums. The lights stayed on late into the night, and this time they weren't burning for someone else's quarterly earnings report. They were ours. They didn't tell me until the night before. I was supposed to be on a panel ethical growth in post-hype markets, which is code for let's all agree we've messed up, but say it nicely. I had my notes ready, even packed a navy blazer I hated but wore when I needed to seem less me. Then the keynote speaker, a visionary VC with too many podcasts, bailed to go do ayahuasca in Tulum. Literally. I got a last-minute call from the event chair. We need someone big, someone with blood on their hands. I laughed. You want a takedown story? I want your story. The room was packed. Sea of lanyards, open laptops, and people pretending to not check Twitter. The lights dimmed. On screen in bold white letters, the price of forgetting the fine print. I stepped out in jeans and a black t-shirt. The blazer stayed in the hotel closet. No teleprompter. Just me, a mic, and the weight of what they'd done. I told them about the duplex, the microwave, the damn enchiladas, how I'd built something out of migraine code and pure spite, how I sold it for $1, and the 6 lines buried in the contract. I didn't perform, I remembered. I told them about Trusty the beach ball mascot and how we once had a back-end update rollout while someone was asleep under their desk with Cheetos on their hoodie. About Trina calling my legacy founder trauma. About Julian crying when he got escorted out. About watching Slack channels go dark while everyone pretended everything was fine. Then I reached under the podium and pulled out a simple black frame. Inside the check, $1 signed, ink slightly smudged. Gasps echoed across the room. Someone in the front row muttered, "No fucking way," like it was a prayer. I held it up like it was Excalibur. I said they thought they were gutting a relic. What they did was trigger the only clause in tech history written with vengeance in mind. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. Theo. One line, final board resignation. It's done. You outlived them all. I didn't smile. I grinned, the kind of grin you make when you know the ending is yours and no one else saw it coming. I closed with this. Always read the contract. Pause twice if you think you're smarter than the woman who wrote it. Standing ovation. Cameras. Phones held high. That video would go viral by morning. They'd call it a masterclass in revenge and resilience, in reading the damn fine print. But I didn't do it for clicks. I did it because they tried to erase me. And I own the blueprint. The next morning, I walked by the old building. The lights on the 5th floor were dim. Half the desks were empty. New receptionist fresh coat of paint over the mission statement. I caught my reflection in the glass and kept walking. Nest Core was already humming. Miles had pushed 3 updates overnight. Beth sent a budget that made me tear up. Nina dropped a new feature into staging like it was nothing. We weren't just back. We were built to last. Have you ever watched someone try to burn you out of your own house, only to realize you built it with fireproof bricks? This story is mine. But I know so many of you out there have been pushed out, cast aside, underestimated. Maybe you didn't have a clause like I did, but maybe you have something better, your own version of a $1 check waiting in a drawer. If this story stirred something in you, drop your story in the comments. Where you're from, what time it is, who tried to count you out. Like, share, subscribe, but only if it felt true. And if you're still in the thick of it, hold the line. Your day will come. Thank you for listening, for being here, for surviving.